Okay. So I was in this hamburger line, ran into this woman I casually knew. Her son was friends with my son. Didn't think anything of it. Went home. We ate our hamburgers. The next day, she calls me and she's like, "Hey, my boss is looking for somebody in Fort Worth to have the same position that I have in Dallas, and I think you would be perfect for it." And she explained to me what it was, and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like something I could do."
Wait,
And
where
she,
were you guys living?
in
Where were you?
Fort Worth,
Oh,
Fort
you're in.
Worth,
Okay.
yeah. But she was doing this job in Dallas. They were looking for somebody to do the same job, but in Fort Worth.
Okay.
So she was like, and it pays this much a month. And I was like, when do I start? Like, it was literally enough money to cover our bills and to cover me to start grad school.
That's so cool.
And I had put out that intention that this is what I wanted to do and started to take the moves forward. Again, had no idea how I was going to make it happen, but I knew that this is what I wanted for myself. And so I got that job. That job put me through grad school, my husband through grad school. And then as a result of that job, I got involved with the hospital where I started teaching and doing stuff for the employees, and also through another lady that I knew. And then I had my surgery. I had been done with my graduate program. And then one day I was teaching a yoga class and again, knew what I wanted to do. And this woman was like, "Hey, I heard that the neurology department got a grant, and I think you'd be perfect to pitch the neurology department for this grant that they have." And so, again, right, my new role that I transitioned into from the hamburger role that I got from the hamburger place was, again, another coincidence. This random lady said this to me in a yoga class. So I applied for the program, got that. Then I did that. And then COVID hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, actually, right before COVID hit, I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter that was like, "Hey, we think you're perfect for this position." And I was like, well, I have a position now, but I was interested. So I started engaging in a conversation with this recruiter just in time when the hospital laid everybody off. I had already had an interview with this other company and I had already been offered a position. And it was like the universe totally was like looking out for me. But my point is that oftentimes the opportunities that are best for us come to us in the most unexpected ways. And in times when we're not out there reaching or grasping or like
Yeah.
stressing out about it, when we're just like doing what we need to do in our lives. And it's really easy. Believe me, I know I'm there now, right? To forget that. But then I started my head going back to like all the amazing things in my life that have happened that I've loved doing has been kind of like a lightning bolt in the sky that you don't know is coming. And then you're just like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? But it comes from like the intentions you're putting out there.
Right.
It
Like how I
comes
met you
from,
thing. It wasn't
yeah,
looking for that. I just was like, well, let's see. I wasn't even gonna go to the talk or whatever. I wasn't even gonna go to the appointment. But yeah, I agree. I think so. And it's just that when it's happening, a lot of times you have to keep reminding yourself this is because you're on this path, right? Like, or you're looking, it's like you can't. I always say there's no assertion in life, right? There's no exclusion, there's only assertion. So like I can't say, I don't want any of these other things. I only want this, right? Like because your brain doesn't understand don't. So if I was like, don't worry about this, instantly you're thinking about that. You can't just exclude it from your thoughts. So
yeah.
what you can do
And
is
also, like, you don't know what sometimes what we think we need and what we think is going to fix whatever pain point we have is actually not what's best for us. That's something too that has been a hard learning lesson for me and that I see over and over and over again. that everything that has happened to me has prepared me for something else. Even in especially the shitty stuff. Like it and even like what you and I were talking about before we started recording about when those periods in your life when you feel alone, like when you have all this space and not really anything to do, those are the periods in my life, like when I was recovering from my surgery, when, in between jobs and things like that, that when I've like totally leaned into it and been like, okay, clearly it's not the time for me to walk or have a job or whatever. So, what should I be right now expanding myself in? And those are the times when I feel like I've grown the most within myself and learned to accept, although in the moment it's really hard to accept what's happening because it's not what we want or how we think things should be.
Right. Well, sometimes it helps me to also think about how I want to be, right? Like if somebody does something to you, like I was saying, backing out on Thanksgiving or whatever, I think, okay, well, this just shows me how I want to be, right? Like my whole life, if somebody's treated me badly or did not, not that particular person, but if somebody's done something to me that I feel like wasn't warranted, right? Like I have a choice. Like it can either make you a better person or make you a bitter person or critical or whatever, all the situations that you deal with. And these are more things like I'm putting into my course. I've been working on some of my course today, and yeah, I mean, I agree. And I'm just, in kind of in the middle of the trees, like looking out at what I'm gonna create.
I heard it's that just reminded me of something I actually listened to this morning. So my son, who's 13, I was driving him to school. He always wants to listen to music, but today he was like, "Can we listen to a Joe Rogan episode?" And I was like,
Joe
"What?"
Rogan.
Yeah, and I thought that was
It's so
different.
funny.
And so I was like, "What episode are you trying to listen to?" So he wanted to listen to, I don't remember his name, but it's some guy that Joe Rogan interviewed that when he was 17 years old, he was having learning difficulties and learning differences. So his parents let him get a GED, but he was always fascinated by forests and trees. And he'd always play when he was young in these trees in New York and these forests in New York. And anyway, so he decided that he was going to go check out the Amazon and he had no equipment.
And he was
No,
17?
yes. And he just like took himself to the Amazon, no plan. And he was talking about this, like no plan, no, like and he even laughs at himself because Joe Rogan is like, what were you wearing? Like show up in the Amazon. And he's like, jeans, which is super uncomfortable, right? Um, anyway, he's no plan, no real nothing. He ends up writing a book, ends up meeting these people from the Amazon. He ends up helping them create this charity and raise money to save the Amazon and
Oh,
now
wow.
like, lives down there. Um, and again, he didn't know what he was signing himself up for. He was just like you always say, like asking the right questions, like, where do I want to be right now? I want to go check out the Amazon. And then like it became, what he does in his life. But that's the thing that's so scary for me, at least. Like I'm a Taurus, so I love plans. I love schedules. Like I need that groundedness in my life. And so uncertainty drives me bananas. Like,
But I'm a Leo, and I feel like I want those things too, but I don't know if that's accurate for Leos. I don't know a lot about astrology, but like a Leo, like a fire sign, right? Like, but I feel like schedules are good for me. I don't know if I necessarily like them, but I know that if I have a schedule, like I usually like I haven't talked to you in a week, at 4:15, I'm gonna be sitting at my computer. I'm not going to be late. Like this is just the way it is. For me, it's better. But if I have no schedule and you're like, well, I'll just talk to you sometime later, it's probably never going to happen.
yeah, yeah. Well, but I mean more like knowing. I schedules are great, I think, for all human. Well, I know actually I've studied it. So schedules help keep us in a rhythm. That's what biorhythms are about. So they're really important because they help give us a sense of stability and structure.
Yeah.
I was referring more to like um the knowing of like, okay, today I'm going to do this. Tomorrow I'm going to do that. Wednesday I'm going to do this versus just letting things unfold.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Um,
plan your day. Like you're planning your goal setting for your day, but when you put that out there, your brain is going to help you accomplish that task during the day.
right, right. Yeah. And but uncertainty of like not knowing what I'm going to need to do, like when you're job searching or when you're trying to start something new, that not knowing what to count on or how it's going to unfold. I think for people that have like adventurous souls, that's okay. Like the guy that just shows up in the Amazon. Like for me, I would have had to be like, this is the guide I'm hiring. This is where I'm going to stay.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are the supplies I need. These, I would have, and he just like shows up and he's like, I'm going to figure it out. And I know people that travel that way, which is, I think it's super courageous, but that is not my style.
Yeah, and I guess I've done that a couple of times when I was younger. Like I said, going to Vegas. Like, well, I don't know if I'm coming home. Maybe if I win. But yeah, I definitely understand. I need to well today I need to follow my own advice sometimes, right? Like ask yourself the right questions because just this morning, like I was telling you, I was really stressed out and going through all that stuff. And I said, you know, I just right before we started talking, I'm like, okay, get a pencil and start writing things down and follow your own advice and like ask yourself, what would advice would you give someone if they were in your shoes? Like if they call, if you're one of your clients called and they were like, this is what's going on. And so I started writing all of these things down and I'm like, this is kind of what I need to put out there too. So I'm getting some direction, but it helps talking to another person who also has direction and who asks.
What was your advice?
Well, obviously, for me, I wrote down like because a personal mission statement, like so you can have one for your life, like you're talking about, one for each day or one for each conversation, right? But like what am I doing, right? Like I was telling you, like I'm sitting here, it's kind of like I'm here just by myself, like it's in a big house, like what am I supposed to do? Um, I know what I want to do, but in order for it to keep moving forward, I have to start asking myself, like, okay, I want to do this. What's next, right? Like, what do I need to find out, or what do I need to offer? Like, what do people want, right? And then I know what I want, and most people want the same thing, right? You said you want to feel safe, you want to feel secure, you want to feel like you know what you're doing, you want to feel like you know where you're going, you want to feel like you're on the right path. So all of these things, right? Like how do you get there, right? Like so then I was like personal mission statement, right? Or personal goals. And then business, it's a little bit different, like how do you overcome obstacles? What questions do you ask yourself when you're in a tough situation? And so these are some of the things I started working on today because I know these things, but like I tell people when you write it down, it becomes real, right? Or you tell somebody, or it's not in a picture, it's a real thing, right? Like you can like kind of grasp it better. And so I started writing all these things down so that I can kind of build something that can be graspable.
Yeah. And I think also it forces you when you're putting stuff on paper to give it some sort of reality, like some sort of structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an artist that takes what's in their imagination and puts it on a canvas. Like it makes it real. It's a creation of something. Same thing with like fear. If you write it down, then you're giving it a place that's not within you. And that I have found is really helpful. I use that a lot, the writing down in conflict, like when I'm upset with someone.
I usually write an email. Do you ever write?
Well, I write like in the heated moment, everything that I want to say. And I always find that by the end of my rant or whatever, I'm like, maybe I need to think about this a little bit more, or "Hmm, this is probably not the best thing to say right now."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I do that. I write emails even to like my friends or people I care about, even Brian, like if we've had disagreement or whatever, like I usually write something if it's something like you said where I'm like kind of before I say something I don't really want to say because I'm upset, I write an email, I write it all down, and then I read over it and I'm like, okay, I guess like I don't really feel this way or that way. And I always like, I actually send it sometimes and I encourage the person, this is what I was really thinking and feeling. Because when two people are like upset or disagreement or whatever, it's hard for those people to, like talk in that moment, right? But like later on, if you sit down and you read what they say, you have time to kind of process how they're feeling and thinking about it. And then you can talk about it. Like I always encourage like talking about it, but kind of really understanding first where the other person's coming from is a big thing. And I'm working on that with my like my best friend who didn't show up for Thanksgiving.
Well, yes, I think it's super helpful to be honest too and to be truthful. Not everybody can handle that, right? When
Yeah.
somebody else is honest with them, but I always think it's better to live the truth than to live a lie. Like, oh, it's fine, because then resentment will show up somewhere else in your relationship, or anger, or
That's
it create,
100%.
huh?
That's 100% agreed because sometimes I know something is like if I keep it to myself, it won't be a disagreement. It's not like really how I feel. And so if I don't say something, I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice, right? So I try to voice like, hey, I might not be right. I'm not saying this because I want to make you wrong, but this is how I feel. And you just argue with how people feel, right? Like if I feel like someone's treating me bad or someone's doing something to me that's not what I want, um, you have to tell the person, right? Like I think you have to be out. Dog barking is really distracting. But you have to tell them how you feel and you can't live a lie like you said, 'cause then it's going to breed resentment somewhere else. And, especially in relationships, it's like if somebody forgets about the trash and then you're like, it's not really the trash, right? It's like 2 weeks ago, you should have told this person they did something that bothered you and you never told them and they thought it was great or whatever, right? Like, I mean, yeah, it's important to talk about all that stuff too.
Yeah. And to be able to have relationships where you're not walking on eggshells.
Yeah, not walking on eggshells or grenades, either one.
That's true too. But you don't set the grenade, the other person does.
I don't know if that's any better though.
No, I know. I know.